Hello, it's B from Being Blissfully Zen. Welcome to my channel, and may you open up to your full spiritual potential now. Today we're exploring a topic that many people quietly experience but rarely talk about openly: emotional numbness. There are moments in life when emotions seem to disappear. You stop reacting the way you once did. Joy feels distant. Motivation fades. Even the things you used to care about deeply may suddenly feel emotionally flat. Some people describe it as feeling disconnected from themselves. Others say they feel empty, detached, or emotionally exhausted. And when this happens, many begin to wonder, what's wrong with me? But emotional numbness may not always mean something is broken inside of you. Sometimes it can be the nervous system's protective response after carrying too much stress, emotional pain, or overwhelm for too long. And spiritually, emotional numbness can sometimes appear during periods of deep inner transformation. In today's video, we'll explore the possible spiritual meaning behind emotional numbness, the connection between the nervous system and emotional shutdown, and why periods of emotional silence may sometimes happen before profound personal growth. If you enjoy topics surrounding spiritual awakening, emotional healing, mindfulness, and inner peace, feel free to subscribe and join our peaceful community. Now let's begin. Many people experience emotional numbness after prolonged periods of stress, anxiety, grief, emotional suppression, or burnout. The nervous system was designed to protect us, and sometimes when emotional intensity becomes too overwhelming, the mind and body begin reducing emotional responsiveness as a form of self-preservation. In other words, the body may temporarily turn down the volume emotionally because it no longer feels safe carrying so much emotional weight. This can happen gradually. At first, a person may feel emotionally overwhelmed, but over time, the exhaustion becomes so constant that the body begins shifting into emotional shutdown. This survival response is often connected to what researchers and trauma specialists describe as nervous system dysregulation and freeze states. Physician and author Gabor Mate has spoken extensively about how chronic stress and emotional suppression affect both the mind and body. It's also important to remember that emotional numbness can sometimes be connected to mental health challenges, trauma, burnout, or prolonged stress. Seeking support from a qualified mental health professional can be an important and supportive step for many people. Sometimes emotional numbness is not the absence of emotion at all. Sometimes it is emotional exhaustion. And for many people, this emotional shutdown can feel frightening because they no longer recognize themselves. Things that once brought happiness may no longer create the same emotional response. Relationships can begin feeling distant. Even simple pleasures may seem strangely muted. But spiritually, there may be another layer to what is happening. Many spiritual traditions describe transformation as the process of shedding old identities, emotional attachments, and unconscious survival patterns. And sometimes before a new version of ourselves fully emerges, the old emotional world begins dissolving first. This can create a strange in-between state. You may no longer feel connected to who you used to be, but you also may not yet feel connected to who you are becoming. This period can feel emotionally empty, confusing, and isolating. Spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle often speaks about how awakening involves loosening identification with old mental and emotional patterns. As awareness begins changing, many people naturally start questioning old beliefs, old goals, old emotional reactions, and even old relationships. And during this transition, emotional detachment can sometimes occur. Not because the soul is disappearing, but because an old identity is slowly losing its grip. For some people, emotional numbness may also develop after years of constantly ignoring their own emotional needs. Many individuals spend years living in survival mode. They're always rushing, and they're always worrying, and are always trying to meet expectations while suppressing their own emotions. Over time, the nervous system can become overstimulated and emotionally fatigued. The body carries stress chemically as well as emotionally. When stress hormones remain elevated for long periods, the body can remain trapped in chronic fight or flight states. Breathing often becomes shallow. Muscles remain tense. Sleep can become disrupted, and emotional balance may slowly begin deteriorating. The mind may continue functioning outwardly, but internally the emotional world becomes quieter and quieter. Some people become so accustomed to emotional suppression that numbness begins feeling normal. But deep beneath emotional numbness, the body is often still carrying unprocessed stress, sadness, fear, grief, or emotional exhaustion. And this is why emotional healing is often connected not only to the mind, but also to the body and nervous system itself. Sometimes the body is not asking us to push harder. Sometimes it is asking us to finally slow down, to breathe, to listen, to rest, to stop abandoning ourselves emotionally. Spiritually, emotional numbness can sometimes become an invitation inward, an invitation to step away from constant distraction and reconnect with the quieter parts of ourselves that have been ignored for way too long. Modern life keeps many people overstimulated almost constantly. Noise, notifications, stress, pressure, comparison, always endless mental activity. And in the middle of all that noise, many people lose connection with their inner emotional world. But healing often begins in stillness, in silence, in presence. Sometimes emotional numbness appears during periods when the soul is asking us to stop performing, stop surviving, and finally becoming quiet enough to hear ourselves again. This does not mean emotional numbness always has a spiritual cause, and persistent emotional numbness or emotional distress should always be taken seriously and supported appropriately when needed. But for many people, periods of emotional disconnection can also become the beginning of deeper self-awareness, healing, and transformation. Sometimes the old emotional self must grow quiet before a more peaceful and authentic self begins emerging. And although this process may feel uncomfortable, confusing, or lonely, it does not necessarily mean you are broken. Sometimes it means you have simply been overwhelmed for too long. And sometimes, deep beneath the silence, transformation has already begun. In part 2, we'll explore gentle techniques that may help reconnect the mind, body, emotions, and nervous system during periods of emotional numbness and spiritual awakening. Please remember that this content is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered medical or psychological advice. Persistent emotional numbness, depression, dissociation, or emotional distress may require support from qualified healthcare or mental health professionals. If you are struggling, reaching out for professional support can be an important part of healing. Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, comment, and consider subscribing to my channel, Being Blissfully Zen, for more spiritual awakening tips. So until next time, beautiful spiritual beings, be blissful, be Zen, and I'll see you soon.